Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Fitz.
And welcome to Point of View on this Thursday, or Tuesday rather, May 14th. That was way off. Welcome to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, for the Millennial Roundtable. So grateful that you've decided to join us on this Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 day. We've got quite a show for you. And joining me, helping me along the way to be able to help guide me through this process, we've got the one and only David Fraga. David, how are you today?
Doing great today, Nick.
Oh, so good. So good to have you here. So good to have you here. Today, we've got quite a show for you. We'll be talking about the delineation between joy and happiness, based off of David Brooks's latest column. It should be I just thought it was a very good treatment of this delineation between joy and happiness, based out of his book, The Second Mountain. Just finished the book and just highly recommend that. The idea of having a first mountain type of person, which would be someone that's moving towards significance, achievement, and then the second mountain type of person is moving towards selflessness, and this idea of giving oneself over and not necessarily asking what can I do not necessarily asking what can I get from the world, but what can I do for the world. It was just a phenomenal little book that I would highly recommend to you all. And so that called The Second Mountain. We'll also be talking a little bit more about the power of social media on this day that is the one and only Mark Zuckerberg's birthday. So happy birthday to Mark Zuckerberg. I believe he turns 35 years old today. We'll be talking about the significance and the power of social media, especially relative to what we're continuing to see, the ability of social media to be able to deplatform individuals, to essentially kick off people from their services. And so we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. And then finally, CollegeGate as well. I'll be really interested to kind of talk through some of this. Just yesterday, Felicity Huffman of Desperate Housewives fame. Sorry, I wasn't getting my TV dramas properly in order. I apologize for that. And so Felicity Huffman of Desperate Housewives fame pled guilty yesterday in the college admissions scandal ring. Went ahead and said that she did admit to paying $15,000 for an individual to go in and to correct the wrong answers on her daughter's SAT tests, and in turn that she pled guilty, and it looks as though she is going to have to serve potentially up to 5 months in prison. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that relative to kind of parenting patterns, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought we'd open it up and just talk a little bit about the power of social media. David, I think many of our people in our audience are keenly aware, some of them are even watching right now, so thank you for tuning in, are keenly aware of the power of social media. One, for our voice to be heard, but also two, for outliers to be given a platform. And, you know, it's causing individuals a little bit of discomfort, I guess, to say the least right now, when you hear about everything that's happening relative to social media.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much power in it. I think it's something that can be it's influential. Mm-hmm. It's a big part of our lives. I mean, you know, in this article that I was reading, just talking about how most adults are spending over 100 minutes a day on it. That's, you know, over an hour. Like that's
a long
crazy
time
to think about. But all that being said, you see how, from previous times, how we've talked, how social media has an effect on the way we see things, right? Mm-hmm. Perspective. And I was also seeing in this article how it has an effect on our finances even. Mm-hmm. Like more than ever, we have a generation, the millennial generation, that is spending way beyond their means in order to keep up with a persona, per se, you know?
Yeah, I wonder though. So, David, is this a social media problem or is this just a human condition problem?
I think it's a mix of both, man.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand.
So
right?
I would wonder. We've always been keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like that's one of the things. Like I'm always just skeptical of when we start to attribute social media. We start to attribute problems of social media that stem from social media, when in reality they're simply just human condition problems. Like, so for example, the reference you just made, the idea that it's causing individuals to go into debt. Well, I don't think Facebook is poking me. Rather, I poke through Facebook, and they're and it's just stirring up a broken part of the human condition in me to try to keep up with the Joneses. And so I'm just not sold into that, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. But one thing that I do notice that Facebook does a great job in doing is letting you know events near you and sending you notifications.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happens, you don't want to miss out a lot of times. Or if you see who's going, because it says, hey, these friends are interested, or hey, you should go because, I mean, all your friends are going, so you might as well go.
Yeah, but again, like I guess I'm always just skeptical of whether there's really legitimacy in that. I think the power of Facebook, what I'm most concerned about, is this reality of their ability to simply to be free from the regulation, to be free from the punishment of the words that are put on there, but then to have the power to be able to publish like they so choose. So, for example, I'm making the delineation between being a publisher and being a platform. So if you're a publisher, so for example, if I'm looking at some of our team right now, and I know that if we are to publish or we were to say something that would be libel or that would be slander, someone would have the opportunity to come alongside and to sue us for those. And we would, and then it would go through the court process. And then eventually, if it was proven to be true and right and correct, then we would have to pay damages to that individual or to that entity. And so there's a culpability with what we allow that's put here through the microphone or through the magazine. And so there's ties to that. And so it requires restriction as to who you allow to be able to be published through your magazine or through behind your microphone. Whereas for Facebook, anybody can say anything and Facebook can't be sued for it. Like they're just a platform. And so that's why my brother can say all sorts of crazy stuff on Facebook. Just kidding, Ryan. So anyone can say all sorts of crazy stuff on Facebook, and you can't sue Facebook for what someone else says. So, but then they also have the propensity, as we've seen all throughout the news thus far, is they have the opportunity to be able to deplatform an individual, to be able to silence that person. So it seems as though they enjoy the benefits of a platform, but they also enjoy the privileges that come with being a publisher as well, but they don't have to suffer the consequences of being a publisher. That's the thing that concerns me the most. Yeah,
and I see how that can affect individuals, that can affect cultures, and if it affect environments and businesses tremendously, as we have seen, like parties, you know, politically, how some posts have been taken down, right? Yeah. But even we've also seen just a rise on mental health issues through you know, social media, and how powerful that is, right? But
yeah, I'm increasingly concerned about that, and I understand, like, especially in light of just the rise right now of the prominence, as well as the congressional authorities' attention that's being given on social media right now. There, you have individuals like Mark Zuckerberg. You have individuals even like Tim Cook and others that have said, we're willing to be set up for regulation. We're willing to kind of endure this and give this to us. But I just wonder what that particularly looks like. And so what does it look like to protect the privacy the users? What does it look like to protect the experience, that what's translated online, make sure that hate speech online doesn't turn into death threats in real life? And so there's just a lot of things that we'll continue to talk about, but right now we've got to take a break right now. And so when we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about social media, specifically kind of the regulation that appears to be coming right now, some of the problems inherent in it. But also, I don't want to forget about some of the benefits of it as well, because I think there's a lot of good stuff that's coming from it. But we've got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, more from Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke rolled out his version of the Green New Deal in a video from Yosemite Valley. He doesn't call for such draconian action as the legislation sponsored by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Her plan calls for net zero greenhouse gas emissions in 10 years. He has a target somewhere around the year 2050. Perhaps we should call it the light Green New Deal. In his video, Beto calls it the most ambitious climate plan in the history of the United States. You have to believe some environmentalists are rolling their eyes. His target is more than 20 years further down the road from the Green New Deal legislation in Congress. If climate change is such an existential threat, some candidates keep telling us, then why is his target around the year 2050? Most of this is wishful thinking and utopian planning. The editors at the Wall Street Journal lamented that environmentalist and Democrat candidates tell us that the apocalypse is coming, but refuse to offer a substantive proposal that is honest about what it would take to get to zero global emissions. This is a debate about how many solar-powered unicorns can dance on the top of a wind turbine. Beto would have the U.S. rejoin the Paris Agreement and stop all oil and gas leases on federal lands. His cabinet would then oversee the permitting decisions in the nation to make sure they account for climate cost and community impacts. Congress would have to enact emission standards and send a clear price signal to the market, which might be code for a carbon tax and other cap-and-trade schemes. Congress would also have to find the money for all of this. In the end, he has put forth a proposal that neither side of the political aisle would adopt. It is too timid for the environmentalist and too radical for most other Americans. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitt. So grateful that you have decided to join us today. We have been talking a little bit about Facebook in light of Mark Zuckerberg's birthday. So happy birthday, Mr. Zuckerberg. We're exceedingly trying to celebrate you as best so we can. And so we've been talking a little bit about some of the recent moves that have been made with Facebook relative to kind of silencing, deplatforming certain individuals. And that is causing consternation, that's causing frustration, that's causing what have you among certain individuals and entities. So we read earlier last week that Facebook went ahead and they deplatformed individuals such as Louis Farrakhan, Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos. And so there was these other individuals that they deemed their speech was hateful and they deemed their speech was violent. Therefore, they took their speech, they took their ability to be able to communicate via Facebook away from them. And so David, help me to understand, think through this with me. What's your take on this idea of Facebook going alongside and trying to silence certain individuals?
I think that's a curious thing because it's almost like they want for people to be able to have that freedom, yet obviously if they're getting a lot of comments, a lot of hate mail, to do something about a situation, are they the ones who put regulations per se? Mm-hmm. Are they the law? So there's a lot of questions that I would like to ask them per se, like in my mind, just because this is, maybe the speech was hateful. I never got a chance to look at that speech, but I wonder how many other people really need to take down some posts that are inappropriate or a little too far. But at the same time, like, what do you do? What kind of regulations can you put on that are actually healthy?
And I think you brought up a really great point too that I want you to speak to, because you spoke about it during the break right now relative to kind of terrorist organizations that are utilizing the social media outlets. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's something I know a lot of terrorist organizations use, either Twitter, Messenger, whatever it is, but just to communicate with one another. And so with regulations, I was going to ask you, like, how do you think those terrorist organizations would either like be shut down, have more difficulty in communicating, be more targeted, be more like found or controlled?
Yeah,
so,
I think one of the things that I'm keenly aware of in kind of our 2019 setting right now is that we have this understanding of concept creep that has become extremely pervasive, that has to be talked about when we're talking about social media right now. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about concept creep, it's the expanding of a definition of a term that really, it doesn't become all encompassing, but it tends to carry up a lot more than what it was originally intended. And the kind of primary example that's utilized is this word trauma. There used to be a day that trauma was kind of was utilized in examples such as a soldier goes off to war and experiences an injury in war, experiences a serious wound, suffers, sees something very unbelievable. But now trauma, due to concept creep, the word trauma, that definition has been expanded now. And so it's not, they're equating now with what happens in war being traumatic to reading Huckleberry Finn would be traumatic. Hence the reason why there needs to be a trigger warning. And so those are two very different instances, two qualitatively significant experiences, but yet they're all encompassed in the same word. And so I think that's a concept that I think needs to be introduced and needs to be entertained when you're talking about kind of this idea of regulating, of censoring, of the censorship that goes on in Facebook.
Right.
I'm more in the mind of thinking about how do you apply First Amendment principles to Facebook. And so, for example, you can't just say anything on Facebook, but there should be some liabilities when an individual issues threats on Facebook. Again, this goes back to concept creep, like what constitutes a threat. And so I think you need to have strict, tight definitions. I would argue for being more narrow in purpose, so that, because when you allow them to get a little bit more subject to interpretation, typically, if we look to the past, and there's a guy named Boris Johnson wrote a book called The Churchill Factor, and he says if you look to the past, you can see more clearly into the future. And I think if we look to the past, what we'll continue to see is that conservatives typically will get censored because of this, because if we give it kind of a bigger, broader definition of what a threat, what constitutes threat, what constitutes violence. And so I think end of day, I think, one, we need to be aware of the idea of concept creep. Two, I think we would do well to begin to explore what would be First Amendment principles that we put into Facebook, and we kind of allow Facebook to be a part of that. And then three, I think we need to be keenly aware of keeping it as narrow as possible. One, because I find it deplorable. I find it disgusting that anti-Semitism has continued to run rampant. I find it deplorable, offensive. Certain racist tropes are continued to be utilized on Facebook. I find it disgusting that we're having to put up with these things that we should be well past, just because we've seen the horror of it. And so I'd like to see these private companies begin to institute policies that police their own better. But I also am keenly aware that I don't want us to become so broad and loose, because I know where this, if the past is any indication, I know where this ends, and it typically does not end well for conservatives. And so I think that'll be interesting moving forward. But I want you to take out your crystal ball then. So do you anticipate Congress taking any action on this? I don't see Congress taking any action on this anytime soon. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've heard of some Congress members attempt to like push some bills or whatever it is, and in order to like try to have a handle on this situation with social media and everything, but it's never passed. Like it's never reached to a point where people are like on board 100% with it. And
so if I'm reading my tarot cards correctly, and again, I'm not a big tarot card reader, and I'm for all our listeners, I promise I'm not a tarot card reader. I love Jesus, and so if I'm thinking about the cards and I'm thinking about the political winds and the zeitgeist, I don't imagine Congress taking up such regulations anytime soon for a number of reasons. One, I think the research is very clear and experience is very clear that it has been politically advantageous to be a Democrat into these spheres and progressives, and it typically tends to target the conservative side. Granted, they target the outlier, hateful people on both sides, but it typically tends to be more favorable towards progressives and towards the left. And so, and knowing this leads to point two, the idea that right now that the Democrats control the House. I don't imagine them taking up any type of legislation right now. And there's a couple of other things that are going on right now that they're giving attention to. And so I don't imagine Congress, especially going into an election year, in which there's going to be a great amount of attention and a great amount of resources poured into kind of Facebook and social media to be able to get reelected or to get elected for the first time. I don't imagine Congress taking this up, but then again, there's a lot of things I would not have imagined that have happened in the past 2 years, and so I will be the first to admit when I'm wrong, and I would hope though that something would happen. Are there things on your wish list that you think when Congress is going to go about, if they ever do entertain the idea of regulating some of these entities, is there anything that's on your wish list, things that you'd like to see them think through and apply?
Well, I just real quick want to touch base on a point that there is that rise of just reactionary emotions through the power of social media, right? And with that, I don't know if I really have a wish list other than it's just one of those things that it just seems like it's a lot of fire control. There's just so much that Congress is attempting to control. But if Congress controls social media, or if any kind of you're looking at a government that is attempting to control free speech. You're looking at a government that is going to maybe step into a realm where it's a little too far. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure on that. I'm always hesitant, just from a conservative perspective of government overreaching and getting involved in certain entities. But I think Facebook has just become an increasing part of the American experience, and not necessarily saying that because it's becoming more part of the American experience that it needs to be subject to some regulation. But I'm just increasingly concerned about what social media is doing to us, not necessarily what it's causing us to do, but what it's doing inside of us, that I think we need to be very aware. I'm always reminded of a little quip that was in Walter Isaacson's biography on Steve Jobs, and when Isaacson was interviewing Steve Jobs, Isaacson noted that Steve Jobs' kids didn't have any technology. He says, "I would never allow them to have this," and even Steve Jobs was keenly aware of the power that this technology has on us and over us. And so I think we need to be having some of those conversations, not necessarily from a government perspective, which I do think that needs to happen, but also just from an interpersonal and from a family and community perspective as well.
Agreed.
But we've got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and there's an article that's on our website, pointofview.net, that you can tap into to talk about the power that social media has right now and what it's actually doing inside of us. And so we'll talk about that right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. On this Mark Zuckerberg birthday, we've been talking about everything about social media right now. And perhaps it's coincidence that today is also National Decency Day. And we're talking about the place where decency probably is like the dodo bird. It's just kind of non-extinct. It's kind of extinct, rather. But nevertheless, we have joined here at the Millennial Roundtable by David Fraga. And we have been talking about social media, especially from the governmental perspective. The need, is there a need for government to kind of step in, offer some regulations, offer some guidelines, add some accountability to social media? But now I want to kind of switch over to a certain degree. And for those of you that have been listening, that have been following along, I am really hesitant, to say the very least, that I know that social media does something to us, but I think it more or less reveals something already inherent within us and just amplifies it. And so the imagery that I often draw upon is this idea that social media is just a microphone. It just kind of amplifies what we put in front of it. And more often than not, we're putting our body in front of it, we're putting our voice in front of it, and it's just amplifying these characteristics and traits that are already inherent and built within us. Just kind of going back to the human condition doesn't change. And so that's why the biblical narrative is just so rich in helping us to understand that which is right and wrong. And so we have been, I posted an article on the Point of View website, or rather, team Karen, phenomenal job of posting this article on the Point of View website. And I want us to kind of give a little bit of attention to it. So if you go to pointofview.net, pointofview.net, click on the show notes, and you're going to see this article on the power of social media right now. And so, David, I'd love to be able to kind of come back and forth with you on this. And so let's just talk about some of these statistics that are being illuminated in this study. How does it fall upon you? What are your impressions of it? And more or less, I'm probably just going to argue with you on the opposite side because there's nothing more boring than a conversation in which everybody agrees.
Right.
And so there's one, according to some research out of the financial firm Charles Schwab, nearly half of millennials, around 49%, say that their spending habits have been influenced by the photos and experiences their friends share on social media, compared with only about 1/3 of Americans in general. And now, so when I read that doesn't strike me as odd. It seems very that's just for me, that's just keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like, and it doesn't, like, at the end of the day, like I think now we've always suffered from comparison. We've always had to deal with this idea of envy, and it just seems like now we've just got it digitally placed before us. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of millennials who make, I think someone used the term $30,000 millionaires.
Oh, yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
I think it was one of my mentors who told me that, but it's true. It's just like we want to be sure that we're keeping up, right? Keeping up with what everyone else is doing. We've talked about, FOMO. We've talked about fear of missing out, fear of being a part of something. And I think a lot has to do with just if our friends are doing it, why can't we do it? We figure out a way, we find a way to find some money, some resources to just get to a place.
So is social media the problem in this equation, or is this a human spirit problem?
Well, it's kind of like what you said before. It amplifies.
Yeah.
Social media is just a magnifying glass of, where your heart's really at, what are you looking for, what are you searching.
I wish we could. I might just text message one of my friends that's a social media influencer during the break and see if we can't have her come on there. Just because I think that this is given rise, because at the end of the day, like, it's in the free market, this enterprise system that we have, it's given rise to some needs about individuals that can capitalize on this desire to be able to show and to model what some of these clothes that individuals might want. And so I've got friends now that are very much, I don't know what they do with their lives, but I know that they're making really great money and they're setting their own hours, and they're just able, what literally on my phone, for our listeners, on my phone, all my social media apps are congregated into one folder, and that folder is titled Waste of Time. Like, quite literally, it's titled Waste of Time. And it like, my friends that are in social media world that do marketing or that are influencers, they make fun of me for this, and they kind of take offense at it sometimes, not anymore, because they can make fun of me for a variety of other things. Just because when I get on social media, it's a waste of time for me to be there. But when they get on social media, they can make money while they're there.
Exactly.
And I think that's like one of the byproducts of this world that we're living in now, is that they've been able to see that people go to social media to be influenced, and in turn they're individuals that have leveraged their influence, and now companies are paying them to post on this site. So to a certain degree, it's a good thing because individuals are starting new businesses, and this is advantageous because it's the prosperity it's the wave that causes all boats to rise. But in turn, some people are drowning right now, specifically in debt because of what's happening, right?
Yeah, and I think the beauty about social media, part of that, and this is my opinion, this is what I think, but it's meant to be monetized to a certain extent. Obviously, like you see Twitter, you see Instagram, you see all these platforms. But I think one of the coolest things about this is we see a rise of entrepreneurship. We see a rise of just people being self-employed, quote unquote. And that peeves a lot of businesses because they're trying to make their businesses more attractive for millennials to join. Yeah. And then you see how this trend just continues on and on and on, right? But go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you even see this. I mean, it's not just even in clothing. You even see it like in food as well. Like if you get on Twitter and you follow either Wendy's or you follow any of some of these guys, some of these social media accounts, they major in sass because they know that when they give a sassy reply or they give a sassy remark or they say, hey, retweet this 200,000 times or 2 million times and we'll bring back spicy nuggets is what Chance the Rapper did a couple of weeks ago with Wendy's, and Chance was like, deal. And then literally everybody, I can't remember if it was like 200,000. Do you remember this?
Yes,
it's
nuts how much exposure.
Yeah, and like it's like free exposure. Like what small company or what company period wouldn't like that type of advertisement? They didn't have to pay Chance anything that I know.
Minimal cost.
And literally, they didn't have to pay Chance anything. And lo and behold, now their product is associated with Chance. Chance uses his platform to be able to get that out. Where in a previous world, you would have to, one, pay Chance the Rapper to come on. Two, you'd have to pay a production company to be to film this or to be able to produce this advertisement. And then three, you would have to pay other entities to be able to air this. And now on social media, hey, I bet you, Chance, that you can't get 2 million or whatever likes or whatever he did, and we'll bring back some spicy nuggets, which in turn is simply just people going to buy more money into Wendy's. And so I just don't see this as negative for me.
Right. I mean, I've seen people I've met people who have majored in social media from other universities are opening up as a major. And I'm just like, you're paying 4 years of college in order to major in social media. You know? And that just blows my mind. But the reality of it is just a lot of collaborations, a lot of marketing. It is so much possibility of exposure. Heck, I think about a few months ago, there was this world record breaking, just like this picture of an egg.
Oh yeah, like
do you remember that?
Literally, it was just an egg, and people were liking it, and that's what gets our attention now. It reminds me of amusing ourselves to death. Neil Postman now, right? So Neil Postman postulates back in 1985 when television was the thing that was rotting away our brains, and you couldn't sit too close to television. He would say that we've always had these trivialities that have been a part of the entertainment business. There's always been triviality, but the merging now that's coming is that in order to be informing, it has to be entertaining. And that's what's become so detrimental to us. I think everything has to be entertaining now to be informative. And I think that's where it's very difficult for us because at the end of the day, some things we just need to know and don't need to be entertained by it, but we're merging these two things together. The kind of classic example that he gives is like, so tragically 5 people died yesterday in Alaska through these 2 planes that kind of collided. And then coming up next, we're talking about some kittens, right? And you're merging these two things and you're desensitizing individuals to kind of the seriousness of certain topics. But let's continue on with this article because we went on a tangent, and typically that's what happens. And so another one of the surveys indicated, and again, in the power of social media, roughly 2 in 3 millennials think that social media has a negative impact on their financial well-being, according to a survey out of Fidelity. When you hear that statistic, David, do you think, that's about right? Maybe that's a little too much. What are your initial thoughts?
I would say it's about right. Okay. I would say a lot of people purchase clothing, purchase food items. Like you see all these companies like that deliver food to your door. And you just click here and you get promo codes like crazy, you know, or you get, hey, click here, join the rewards, get a promo. Like,
And we're coming up on a break right now, and so we're going to continue talking about this article and kind of going through some of these statistics that I think are illuminating. But when we come back, what I want to do though is I want to illuminate what I think is missing, because we haven't just had the addition of social media. Because that's one part of the story. The other part of the story that we're missing right now is that what C.S. Lewis called, we have men without chests. We have these individuals that don't have these purposes and values that are helping them to be able to, one, interact with these new forms of new things in the world. And so we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jack Phillips's long ordeal appears to be over, but as Justice Kennedy wrote for the majority in Jack's case, the outcome of cases like this and other circumstances must await further elaboration in the courts. That includes First Liberty's clients, Aaron and Melissa Klein. The state of Oregon shut down Aaron and Melissa Klein's Sweet Cakes by Melissa, penalizing them $135,000 for the simple act of declining to create a custom wedding cake for a same-sex wedding ceremony. Oregon rests all of its actions on a law that theoretically applies generally to everyone and, on its face, treats religious exercise neutrally. That position is grounded in the 1990 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court called Employment Division v. Smith. The product of the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the majority opinion in Employment Division has been roundly criticized through the years. The danger of Employment Division is that it allows laws that do burden one of the key provisions of the First Amendment, namely the free exercise of religion, to escape meaningful judicial review. Aaron and Melissa's case provides the court an opportunity to correct that. Jack Phillips's case left American business owners wondering whether the government can prescribe what they believe and force them to confess accordingly. The Constitution prohibits government officials, high or petty, from compelling small business owners to create a message contrary to their religious beliefs. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am your host, Nick Pitts. You know, sometimes I will often say, if only we had the microphones on during the commercial break. And I think that was one of the moments right now where we would have had the microphone on, because my contention is that, yes, social media has amplified certain things in our world today. It's amplified this comparison. It's amplified envy. It's amplified these outliers that allow them to have a much larger platform per se. But I think that all they've done, though, is just put a magnifying glass. If I use another illustration, they put a magnifying glass to that which is already there. Like, the idea of envy has always been a part of us. We're just now more keenly aware of the envy of someone halfway across the world because of what social media has done. And so that's why I'm a little bit contentious there. And then also, like what I alluded to and David and I were talking about, over the break is just the reality that, like at the end of the day, like social media has come into this, but one of the things that's left this and that has created this with these problems is just increasingly we have individuals that have no chest, right? Like that's what C.S. Lewis would say in his work. It's this reality that we haven't inculcated these values and these principles into individuals so they know how to deal with jealousy when it arises, that they know how to deal with pride when it arises, that they know how to deal with what's my purpose in life. And I'm not just wandering aimlessly from thing to thing. Like, granted, I'm a broken individual, but I think one of the reasons why social media isn't such this drawing, it doesn't, now there's a lot of other sins that are in my life, but comparison and envy doesn't come out of social media because I'm very confident in who God has made me to be. And so that envy doesn't get drawn out of social media from me, or doesn't draw envy. Social media doesn't draw envy out of me because I know envy to be what it is, a joy killer in my life. And so when I know who I am and know the purpose that I have and the values that have been instilled in me through the biblical narrative, through nonprofit entities, through NGOs, and these other civic organizations that I'm a part of, like it helps me. I would argue it helps me to be influenced in such a way that I think would be beneficial. And I think the research is clear, leads to a happier life. But I just don't think individuals have that anymore, David.
Right. And I would argue that too, because I would say that the temptation's more presentable, like it's more prevalent, and I think that I want to say that just because something could be used for good, like there's a lot of just the temptation of, you see young kids are being exposed to things that they should not be exposed to at a younger age, and I hear stories all the time, 5-6-year-old just young boys in the locker rooms and whatnot, but it's just terrible. But all that being said, you can also see how, because of that exposure, they don't know how to deal with it at a young age. And so they're growing up with a direct kind of absorbing everything. And then as soon as they hit ages like 13 to 18, it's an indirect kind of lifestyle, which means they don't operate from values because they weren't established healthy values at a young age. So that's what I want to argue as well, because it is a very fine line of development as well.
Yeah, because I mean, any parent. I'll take that back. I think that my dad would just threw me on a bike when I was a kid, and I just got beat up going down Belmont Drive in Cookeville, Tennessee. But no, I'm just kidding, Dad. No, but I mean, just like any good parent isn't just going to let their kid just ride off into the sunset on a bike if they've never trained them on a bike. Like any good parent's not going to let a kid just like good coaches aren't just going to let anybody get onto the field and play in competition. They're going to go to practice first. You've got to build in some of this know-how in order to be able to operate in the competition or at the activity that's put before you. And now again, I know that illustration breaks down, but like I can't approach social media in a healthy way if I don't have certain values and I haven't been trained to be able to handle it. And what I think is really what I just think is the one statistic that we're not citing, and that's not being cited in these things, in these articles that continually tell us what social media is doing to us, is that we just largely, there's just these, we've got, I don't want to say that we don't have values, because I think we all have certain values. I would just argue that we don't have the right values to be able to understand what are healthy ways to be able to engage with technology. And when you don't have those healthy values to be able to engage with technology ceases to be something that helps you and becomes something that gets lorded over you and brings out the worst in you. And that's why I think it can be so detrimental. That's why I think you're starting to see so many of these things relative to depression at younger ages, relative to cutting is skyrocketing at younger ages, relative to suicides that are skyrocketing, bullying that's we're seeing all these measures that are coming alongside. I want to say correlation causation, but that are coming alongside with this rise in social media that I think some research now is starting to point back and saying, well, it's directly tied to this. And one of the things that we need to start thinking through is, how do we inculcate these healthy values to help us not get rid of social media? Because I think that's the wrong thing. because getting rid of social media is just going to replace it with something else that's going to bring about these very same things just in a different way. It's getting the right values inculcated into us so that we can properly navigate our way through this world.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think just to build on top of that, you were talking about how you could see yourself in a healthy way. When you can operate healthy and using social media, then it's not a bad thing, right? But I would also argue that there's a lot of people, especially our millennial generation, that they don't have that emotional IQ, and so therefore they don't know that they're unhealthy when they are healthy, and so they fall into this pitfall, and it just snowballs. And I would say, Augustine talks about know thyself, right?
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is if you understand where you are, who you are, and it goes back to identity, it goes back to just so many different roots. But when you can understand those things, then you can operate in a healthy manner and growing,
Yeah. It goes back to and again, I know I'm a Christian, and I know the vast majority of our listeners are Christians. And so I would say the easy thing for us to do is to go to church. I think church inculcates certain values and helps you to be able to understand and navigate your way through the world. Hence the reason why the biblical narrative is likened to a lamp that illuminates a path. It's likened to a lantern that lights your feet on that path. I think there's certain values that's found to help you, because the last thing that I think needs to happen is for us just to I'm just not of the mind to completely withdraw from this world. That's just not my bent. I lean more on the redemptive side, and I want to figure out ways to be able to redeem and be able to utilize these tools, and technology being one of them, and social media being one of them, that's healthy in a way. And I'm worried, and it just kind of, it disheartens me when there's the knee-jerk reaction of, well, we see a rise in depression, and then we read one article that says the rise in depression is due to individuals on social media, and then we just say, well, I just need to completely get rid of social media, which I just don't think is healthy.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's healthy, because I think there's something else that's happening within your spirit that's indicating that you've just got an unhealthy balance, and you need to. Social media might be bringing that out of you, but it's not necessarily the source of that in you as well. But we'd love to hear from you. What do you have to think about social media? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Can it be redeemed? You can call into the show, 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. Or maybe you're thinking to yourself, Nick, you're kind of crazy for saying that social media is a waste of time, or you don't believe me. So just so you know, I was texting Kirby just a second ago, and so I think you can maybe see it. You can maybe see it if you get close enough on there. Yeah, see, waste of time. And also, there's some messages that need to be replied back to. But nevertheless, do you think social media is a proper framework to be able to view social media? You can let us know. You can call in 800-351-1212, or the height of hypocrisy. No, I'm just kidding. You can go on Facebook. If you have a healthy way to be able to engage on Facebook, go facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Share what you have to think. We'll be back right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this May 14th. Eventually, I'm going to get this date right. We're so grateful that you have decided to join us today. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by David Fraga. And so for those of you that are tuning in for now the second hour, you know that now I am 2 for 2 for messing up the actual date on this. But nevertheless, it's been an exciting show, to say the least. And so during the first hour, we were talking a little bit about social media, specifically from the regulatory standpoint, 1, and then 2, in the latter part of the hour, we were talking about some of the effects and some recent surveys that have been put as to what it's actually doing to us as individuals. And we posted that article on our Facebook website, or on the Point of View website. And so one of the interesting things that we were going back and forth on is this reality that Facebook, during the first part of the hour, we were talking about the idea of it being, is it a publisher? Is it an open platform? Or is it more of like, or rather, that's it. Is it a platform or a publisher? If it's a publisher, then there's certain things that are put on there that individuals can be subject to libel, they can be subject to slander, and individuals can sue Facebook if the charges are leveled against them and they're deemed to be true and correct. And then they can be sued, and they can suffer damages from that, or the damages that they've perpetuated. And right now, but also with the publisher has an opportunity, or has a propensity, to be able to say, yes, you can write, you can communicate on our side, or no, you can't. So there's there's more power with it, but there's also more responsibility in it. Whereas if you're a platform, you just kind of say, well, here it is. Everybody, you can have a free for all, but you can't be sued on it, and you can't be sued for slander or libel, because that's just somebody else on the platform that's utilizing that. So Facebook can't be sued for what somebody says, because they're just an open platform. And so, but one of the interesting things that we're finding right now is that Facebook is operating like a publisher, but is being treated like a platform. So they're getting the benefit of saying, you can be on, you can be on. So we're going to deplatform the Milo Yiannopoulos, the Alex Joneses, the Louis Farrakhan's. So acting like a publisher by saying you can be on and you can't be on. But then they're also being treated like a platform, whereas anybody just has the opportunity to be able to say whatever they want. And then Facebook can't be sued for it. And so what is being entertained right now is the idea, should Facebook be treated, Facebook and all social media for that example, for that reason, should they be treated more like a publisher? Because, again, some of the things that are being said on there, or should they just be treated as an open platform, kind of like a free-for-all? And so we talked a little bit about that. And then we also, during the second part of the hour, we're just talking about some of the effects of what social media is actually doing to us. And we kind of reviewed some of the surveys and statistics. And we're going to continue that conversation and moving forward. But we also know that you have an opportunity to call in as well. And so we want to make sure that you are well aware of that. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Offer your comments on Facebook and social media. One of the things, David, that we were talking about is this on the website. We have this article posted, and we talked about how one example for that we utilize is the idea that 49% of millennials say that their spending habits have been influenced by the photos and experiences their friends share on social media. Another survey found 2 in 3 millennials think that social media has a negative impact on their financial well-being, and how they bifurcated it and said that this is affecting millennials more than it is affecting boomers. And so it brings up the question of whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And we went back and forth on that, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how they are just trying to make that difference between boomers and millennials. And I would say that a lot to do with the boomers, their just priorities aren't there for social media, you know. But I would say for millennials, it's a struggle, but it is stepping into a new realm where it is something that it is a different realm to deal with per se. And I would say that one of the biggest things that, going back a little to the biblical narrative here, is that the enemy tries to distract us a lot of times from things, but I also see how the enemy can speed us up for some things, right? There could be an illusion of productivity that isn't quite there, that the boomers are like, this is a waste of time, right, per se, or that the millennials could say that this is something that can actually be used, is something that can be, make money, this is a job or whatnot, or it could be something that could be used for good or bad, either way.
Yeah, like one of the things like I'm keenly aware of, and Joyce mentioned something on Facebook about this, and I really appreciate what Joyce's comment was. She said social media has really pulled our teenagers in the wrong direction. When my daughters off her phone, so much more is enjoyable. She turns in her phone at 8:30. Older one is glued to hers too. I stay off all social media on Sundays. It really helps me to get refocused for the week. And so I think Joyce has a right mentality, is that there's just needs to be boundaries. There just needs to be parameters on it. I mean, at the very big Genesis, we see God placed boundaries. Like he placed a boundary for the sun and for the moon. He placed a boundary for the water and for the land. He placed a boundary for the birds and the fish in the sea. Like there's boundaries. And when the fish get out of their boundary, they die.
Essentially.
When the moon gets out of its boundary, waves and just tsunamis and crazy stuff happens relative to the weather.
Right.
And again, and this goes back to our article that I was talking about, how you want to highlight the fact that millennials are influenced by social media. Well, yeah, more millennials are influenced by social media because I just argue that it's just a result of kind of growing up in a social media world. Whereas I would dare say that more boomers are influenced by the Better Business Bureau, and so do we get rid of the Better Business Bureau because it's causing boomers to be able to spend more money? Well, no, we don't. We just help them. We just help boomers. We help millennials better understand how to deal with it. Now, more millennials probably have a problem with Twitter right now. Millennials have a problem with Twitter. Well, yeah. Well, I'd say boomers probably have a problem with billboards. But it's just two different things. And again, I think it goes back to that's just a reality of social media,
right?
And we just have to we have to build out the chest, right? Like you have to inculcate those values and those principles within individuals to help them better understand, how do I navigate through this world that's increasingly becoming more digitized, that Facebook isn't leaving us anytime soon. If anything, it's doubling down. It's getting closer to us, becoming more part of the human experience. And so how do I navigate my way through it, which I think is much more of a better conversation that we can have. That's a horrible phrase that I just utilized, so I apologize to Miss Dark, who's my English teacher. Like I think there's just it needs to be a better conversation that we need to be having right now relative to how do we navigate our way through social media. But we got to go to a break. We'll put that conversation on hold, but I'd love for you to join the conversation. May it be on social media or may it be over the phone. So you can call in. What do you think? Do you think social media, here's the question that I'd be really interested to hear your comments on. Do you think social media is a positive good or is it a positive bad? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Or does it just need to be a thing and we need to figure out how to navigate through it? You can call in 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can go on social media to tell us about social media, like Joyce did. We're so grateful. Go to facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke rolled out his version of the Green New Deal in a video from Yosemite Valley. He doesn't call for such draconian action as the legislation sponsored by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Her plan calls for net zero greenhouse gas emissions in 10 years. He has a target somewhere around the year 2050. Perhaps we should call it the light Green New Deal. In his video, Beto calls it the most ambitious climate plan in the history of the United States. You have to believe some environmentalists are rolling their eyes. His target is more than 20 years further down the road from the Green New Deal legislation in Congress. If climate change is such an existential threat, some candidates keep telling us, then why is his target around the year 2050? Most of this is wishful thinking and utopian planning. The editors at the Wall Street Journal lamented that environmentalist and Democrat candidates tell us that the apocalypse is coming, but refuse to offer a substantive proposal that is honest about what it would take to get to zero global emissions. This is a debate about how many solar-powered unicorns can dance on the top of a wind turbine. Beto would have the U.S. rejoin the Paris Agreement and stop all oil and gas leases on federal lands. His cabinet would then oversee the permitting decisions in the nation to make sure they account for climate cost and community impacts. Congress would have to enact emission standards and send a clear price signal to the market, which might be code for a carbon tax and other cap-and-trade schemes. Congress would also have to find the money for all of this. In the end, he has put forth a proposal that neither side of the political aisle would adopt. It is too timid for the environmentalist and too radical for most other Americans. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by David Fraga. We have been talking about social media. That's right. If we are the Millennial Roundtable, of course we're going to be talking about social media. I mean, naturally, we're on it because we're millennials, but then in turn, we're talking about it, some of the benefits, but also some of the detriments. And so we've been talking about some of the bad things of social media. I want us to highlight a couple of good things right now while we're thinking about it, David, because as a business guy, you can appreciate your dollar can be stretched a lot further on social media relative to advertisement than what it could in a previous generation, where you just had to buy a newspaper ad and just hope that some bit of the population that was prevalent was going to see this, right?
Absolutely. And I think even so for what I do, I help with a lot of nonprofits, just exposure is huge. And you can see how I have a lot of friends who study the algorithms of social media and how they continue to change and shift and how to harness that and use that to your advantage. And so I personally ball on a budget and a very low one, and I try to stick with it, obviously. And I always have to fight those pressures of always trying to go out to eat and things like that. But yes, you can use like for a couple dollars a week, man, you can definitely get like 1,000 people viewing your post, or maybe like 500 engagements, which means like they touch it, they see it, they like it, whatever it is, but just engagements. And if they're able to engage in something, then you are doing far beyond than what a newspaper ad can do.
Yeah, yeah. So. That's one of the things that I want us to be keenly aware of, because that's one of the positive benefits that comes from social media. Like the idea that you can be a more effective steward of your dollar. I mean, if we're thinking about it from a biblical perspective, this reality that the Lord has entrusted you with a certain amount of money if you're a small business owner or a business individual for that matter, or any individual for that matter. And you have an opportunity to be able to leverage that money in such a way that it can be more effective. Whereas in a previous generation, like I said, you would have to send out, you'd spend so much money on just this general call through newspaper or through cable news commercial, and you're only really hoping that you can get, if it's seen by 100,000 people, you're knowing that maybe 20,000 of those 100,000 people are your customers, and you're hoping to get the highest percentage of those 20,000 to see it. Well, now you can spend, like David, you said, I can spend like $1 or $2, and I can target not only target. There's just, I don't know if anyone's ever actually gone into Facebook. Our listeners have ever gone into Facebook and some of the ads. I mean, you can target individuals within zip code, like a zip code,
Right.
certain miles, education, gender, sex. I mean, there's just
Interest,
the ability
everything.
to be able to hone in and zone in on a particular segment of people is just revolutionary. It's kind of scary just because it realizes how much it knows about us.
Right.
But the ability to be able to really target your audience and place your product before a real potentially captive audience is very advantageous for the business person.
Absolutely. And especially when you're trying to promote something and what you believe in, you're speeding up a process.
Yeah.
You know, if you're launching something and if you're so strategic to where you can target the interest of someone, like someone just talks about it. I mean, you hear about these companies that are using these, echoes or using speakers and whatnot, and just you're like, whoa, I wasn't even searching for that, but there are these cookies that are just popping up, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's it's one of those things that you can definitely use to just promote.
Yeah.
Like a campaign. We're just feeding the homeless, or anything at all like that. But it can also be used to try to get the consumer to call to action per se.
Yep.
So it's a science.
Yeah, so there's a benefit to it, but then there's also a detriment with it as
Right.
well, which is one of the things that I think we just have to be keenly aware of, is just the reality that there are certain things that we're giving up. I'm always reminded of a Stanford study when talking about this. We're giving up so much of our information, and there was a Stanford study that indicated, would you be willing to give up convenience for the sake of privacy? And so they used this study about pizza, and what they found is they said, if you were willing to give up some of your privacy, we would be able to figure out, you wouldn't have to input certain data points like what type of pizza you want, where it's delivered, et cetera, et cetera. Or would you prefer your privacy? And then you would have to fill out all that information. And what they found out of the Stanford study is that individuals were more than willing to give up their privacy for the sake of convenience. And so even though many arms are raised right now as to I want to protect my privacy, which is right, there's also this sense of many individuals are saying, well, I'm willing to give up some of that information in order for a little bit of convenience. But it just moves into this world that we're living in today, where social media allows all this information to just be readily available, and businesses are playing upon it right now. Businesses are utilizing it and doing so in such a way that it might be advantageous for them. But as what we're seeing right now, as more and more businesses begin to target us and they're revealing to a certain degree certain things about us, and those things aren't necessarily the greatest because they're revealing certain things that are disadvantageous for us. And that's really where we go back to, David. And so that we'll go back to the article for a second.
Right.
And so one of the things that it said, this article is pointing to is the reality. It says, quote, "This likely exasperates the already tough financial spot many millennials are in. Millennials ages 18 to 34 are more likely than any other generation to have nothing saved, according to a 2017 survey from GoBankingRates.com, with nearly half of young millennials having $0 in savings, and most haven't saved appropriately for retirement either." Well, again, that's just and like I had a friend that I email back and forth that probably is listening right now, and I would dare say that that's probably that number is probably similar to some other ages as well, like just this idea of keeping up with the Joneses, of envy, of not really saving well, and just really having non-frugal spending habits is just something that is playing upon us. And I guess it goes back to advertisers are really keenly aware of who they're putting their product before, and they're successful in getting them to not save their money but spend their money.
Yeah, and I think it's almost I listened to a few podcasts about that marketing, and it's really just the subconscious way of how we look at things. And, you see so many companies able to just have that down to science, and like how they're able to just make something aesthetically pleasing. And it's like, I just got to have it. And so, yeah, I would definitely agree with that part of the article, how a lot of young adults per se, they don't have anything in savings, and it's because they just don't see the need for that, because they think they're going to have that illusion of living forever per se.
And maybe this isn't, and I'll put this before you, because I wouldn't even say, and I think you can argue both ways, but just argue with me for a second. The reality of, yeah, I see businesses are better able to effectively place their advertisements and win customers, and so I really appreciate that, because I appreciate a good business strategy, implementation and execution of a business strategy. But also, I lament the fact that we don't have individuals that are utilizing social media right now that have the values inculcated in them, such as savings, and don't have prudence, and don't have this long. I lament that they don't have those values inculcated in them when they do that. And I think that's not something that can be, I guess you could technically solve it by social media, by putting certain lessons or articles online, but I think it would be better solved in face-to-face, in interpersonal connections of going to a church or joining a civic organization that can put some of those values inside of you, so that you're not spending all your money online. But do you think that plays more to the lack of values that individuals have, or the lack of the right values that individuals have when they're interacting online? Or is that just more highly effective marketing strategies that are being deployed right now?
So as I look at this age group of 18 to 24, I would say that most young adults in that age group are taking their shot in life, which means they're trying to invest everything they have in doing what they want to do, their dream, whether it's trying to act, whether it's trying to make music, whether it's trying to be a photographer full time, whatever it is, they're trying to take their shot and make it. And because of that, they're going all in at something. So they're working part-time jobs, which there are not really any benefits. And if they are having some extra money set aside, they use that to relax, go on vacation. They don't go to a financial firm and say, hey, I just want to open a Roth IRA or a 401k. They don't just do those things. And a lot of them rely on the parents. You see a rise up of young adults living with their parents up until they're 30 or they're married, whatever. And I'm not hating on that at all. I mean, it's very cost effective. But what I would say is that if there's a rise of that, then you see where the finances are going.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. So we talk about how low the unemployment rate is right now, and that's something to be celebrated. But the reality, the number that you're not seeing right now, is how high the underemployment rate is of individuals that don't have jobs that they either studied for or kind of have experience in, that they're just taking some of these side jobs to be able to make a paycheck. And that could account for the no savings or the lack of savings. But we've got to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we are going to continue talking about social media. Specifically, we've got a special guest that's going to be joining us over the phone that I think you will definitely want to hear. We'll be back, though, right after this.
So you sit down and you do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs, your bills, your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would help? What would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. And that is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and it works. No wonder more than 400,000 people are doing this now. And look, whether you're single or married or you have kids, this can make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. Just think what you could do with $500 a month. That can cover a car payment or pay back loans or whatever. Join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Find out more. The MediShare people are so easy to talk to. They can answer any questions. They're super friendly. Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, or 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you have decided to join us on this Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 day. We have been talking about social media in light of Mark Zuckerberg's birthday. Not really, but it does make for a good Millennial Roundtable. And like I said, we have got a special guest with us, joining us over the phone right now. Kirby Minnick, who is a social media influencer, is joining us over the phone. Kirby, how are you?
Hello, hello. I'm doing awesome. How are y'all?
I can't complain, and it wouldn't do me any good if I did anyway. But nevertheless, so Kirby, tell us a little bit about yourself. Before the social media blitz, and I guess you would say the rise in social media fame, and now what's your platform that you're utilizing and you're pushing out relative to kind of your social media position?
Yeah, so I guess you could say that I started using social media about 7 or 8 years ago, but it wasn't till my senior year of high school, so about 5 years ago, that I really felt like the Lord revealed to me, hey, I've given you this platform, I've given you this personality, these gifts for a reason, and I want you to use it to spread my name through entertainment, through teaching people my word over your platform. So that's when I kind of started utilizing it and began using it for ministry. So I make YouTube videos. I now, as of recently, actually started my own podcast, the Bought and Beloved podcast. And I also have a very successful Twitter and Instagram. And I guess just over the years, I've continued to pursue that just because that's what I love to do. I love creating content, especially Christian content, family-friendly content, in order to just make people feel welcomed, loved, and known, especially through the eyes of the Lord. So as of right now, I'm actually graduating in a few days from DBU with
What a great school! What a great school, Kirby. Not that I'm completely biased, but what a great school.
Oh yeah, but I'm getting my I'm getting a majoring in communications with a minor in biblical studies. So basically just applying all of that amazing knowledge that has been cultivated in me for the past 4 years with my social media and continuing with that and public speaking and yeah.
So help us understand, Kirby, so you're saying there came a point where you realized I want to utilize my influence in order to utilize the platform that the Lord is giving me in order to share this welcoming, family-friendly message. So what was it? What was the point? What was the post? What caused you to get a platform? Was there something that you did? Was it positions that you were taking? What space were you in that really caused this groundswell of support that happened around you that now that you realize, my goodness, one day now I have this platform to utilize?
I think the moment, there wasn't necessarily a specific post that went viral for me, and I think that's a lot of people's stories nowadays is that it's just one post, they go viral, they get 1 million followers, and it's like, okay, now I'm set. For me, it was a lot of hard work and connecting with people, making genuine connections, not just networking for gain or for anything like that, because that was never my intention, nor was that really the purpose of social media at that time. It was just creating content and hoping people see it because you've put so much hard work and love and effort into it. So just through connecting with that community and going to different conventions and uploading, I guess, just really relevant content at the time, that's when I began building a following. But the cool part is that, like I said, around my senior year of high school, I felt as though the Lord was saying, hey, I want you to post a video about purity and why you're waiting until marriage. And I was like, oh, Lord, that's going to be controversial. I already know it, just because our world is so on the opposite side of that spectrum. But I uploaded it. I got a lot of persecution, cried about it for a while, debated taking it down. But it was amazing because not only did my church community surround me in that time and uplift me and encourage me, but ever since then, that's when I started seeing rapid growth in my numbers. And again, my identity is not in the numbers, but I knew that the Lord called me to do that. And when I submitted, he blessed that. And that's what it's continued to be. And I know that if I ever make it about me, then that platform's going to crumble and fall. But using it for the Lord, he's just going to continue to multiply his message getting out there.
That's phenomenal. And so help us understand, Kirby, what was that for? Was it video that you were uploading?
Yes.
So you're uploading videos, and I assume it's on YouTube, or was it on Facebook?
Yeah, it was on YouTube.
Okay. And so then you just, was it, okay, so you're taking this Christian position, especially on purity. What were some of the things that you were talking about before you took this explicitly Christian position on purity before marriage?
So before I posted that video, all of my content was still very family friendly, very funny, just just me being me and talking in front of the camera about my opinions, giving advice. And I think that even if you go back and just watch those videos, I'm proclaiming Christ. I'm not ashamed to have explained my beliefs and to say it. But it wasn't until that video and that moment that I knew that things were going to change, and I was going to specifically not only just be putting out the funny content and the videos that kind of get my creativity out there, but more so being a teacher of the word on a platform that is a mission field in itself. Because, I mean, like we've seen, videos go viral all over the world in 2 seconds. And what a great opportunity that we get to just, metaphorically lace up our sandals and go on social media and just spread the good news that way. So my content has always been family friendly and funny, but that's the moment that it became like very ministry minded and based.
And so now, what does your content look like now? Is it more just real life issues rather? Is it more explicitly Christian like perspectives? What's kind of the stuff? If we were to go to your YouTube page now, what kind of stuff are we going to be engaging with?
Yeah. So again, you'll get a good taste of the funny content, the me just being me, giving advice and lifestyle, all kinds of stuff like that. But when it comes to the Christian aspect of it, that's primarily what you're going to see. You're going to see me breaking down the word, answering really hard-hitting topics, and just diving in and basically teaching my followers and those who watch my videos how to read the word for themselves, how to exegete scripture, how to have a personal relationship with the Lord. And it's me almost like mentoring and discipling in a way, which can be hard without that face-to-face interaction and without that very intimate intentionality that you can get just one-on-one. But I mean, I'm doing the best I can with what I got, and I'm sure that you can see that not only will you be entertained through the content, but you'll get fed through the content as well.
That's phenomenal. And so what our plans are after graduation now? The question that you've probably heard about 7 million times, right? Outside of the phrase, congratulations.
Well, thank you for that. I'm super excited to be graduating to finally catch up on, the 12 years of sleep I've missed out on. But no, I think this is a very crazy season I'm in, just because I don't have any definite, I guess, clarification as to what I'm doing. I'm not signed on to like a specific job or this or that, because I'm a content creator. I'm basically freelancing my own brand essentially with YouTube and Instagram and podcasting and public speaking and preaching. So this next season, I believe that the Lord gave me a specific word that right now I'm in a place of waiting, in a place that seems like a wilderness. But wilderness does not mean an absence of God's presence. If anything, it's a place where we get to be dependent on him and draw closer to him. Because just like Hosea chapter 2 says that in the wilderness, that's where vineyards will begin to spring up. That's where we will gain our praise voice again, just like Israel when they came out of Egypt. So I'm in a place right now where, although I don't know exactly what's ahead of me, I am just being intentional in the moment to press into the Lord and to keep cultivating my social media and growing that, because I definitely believe that he doesn't want me to settle in a job for the sake of, oh, well, I'm being provided for, like, I'm fine, I can make my own money, blah, blah, blah. But I think he's really just testing me to put my trust and faith in him with the ministry he has entrusted in me. So those are my plans as of right now.
And that's phenomenal. And so we've got to take a break right now. And if Kirby, if you're willing to stick around with us for the next segment, I'd love to talk more with you about just some of the ethical things that you take into account. Just because we've been talking about, specifically before you came on, just some of the hazards that we're starting to see relative to the rise of individuals in cutting, the rise of depression, the rise of just this idea of comparison and envy that's just on the rise. And a lot of these studies are pointing back to social media. And so how do you, as an individual that has great influence in social media, do so in a way that doesn't bring out the worst in individuals, but really speaks life into individuals and really looks to try to accentuate some of the best in individuals? But we got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, more with Kirby Minnick. So we want to encourage you. You can either go on to our Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, share a question or comment, or call in 800-351-1212. You can ask a question as well. But we've got to go to a break. When we come back, more with Kirby Minnick right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jack Phillips's long ordeal appears to be over, but as Justice Kennedy wrote for the majority in Jack's case, the outcome of cases like this and other circumstances must await further elaboration in the courts. That includes First Liberty's clients, Aaron and Melissa Klein. The state of Oregon shut down Aaron and Melissa Klein's Sweet Cakes by Melissa, penalizing them $135,000 for the simple act of declining to create a custom wedding cake for a same-sex wedding ceremony. Oregon rests all of its actions on a law that theoretically applies generally to everyone and, on its face, treats religious exercise neutrally. That position is grounded in the 1990 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court called Employment Division v. Smith. The product of the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the majority opinion in Employment Division has been roundly criticized through the years. The danger of Employment Division is that it allows laws that do burden one of the key provisions of the First Amendment, namely the free exercise of religion, to escape meaningful judicial review. Aaron and Melissa's case provides the court an opportunity to correct that. Jack Phillips's case left American business owners wondering whether the government can prescribe what they believe and force them to confess accordingly. The Constitution prohibits government officials, high or petty, from compelling small business owners to create a message contrary to their religious beliefs. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitt. So grateful that you have decided to join us. We are being joined in studio. We've got David Fraga that's joining us. And then over the phone, we've got Kirby Minnick that's joining us, a social media influencer leveraging her platform in order to extend the kingdom of God. Kirby, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Still there. So we didn't scare her off, David.
Not yet.
Like it's the small, steady things, and maybe I'll start introducing even cornier jokes into it, and maybe that'll do it. But nevertheless, so Kirby is joining us, and so she was sharing with us. There came a point when she was developing her platform and really heard a word from the Lord to be able to utilize her platform in such a way that she might be able to share just wholesome faith, family-friendly messages, but also to be able to explicitly kind of start sharing about Jesus and some of the principles that she was gleaning from the biblical narrative. And so one of the things that I'm interested in, though, Kirby, just because we're both keenly aware of just some of the social science studies and some of the research out there right now that's pointing to just the increase in depression rates, the increase in cutting, the increase in suicide, some of these things that are being tied back to social media. So help us to understand these two competing ideas of someone that's, one, utilizing their platform that they've been given through social media in order to do good, but then hearing about this research about individuals utilizing these platforms are experiencing these negative anything but the fullness of life that Jesus died in order to give us.
Definitely. Well, I think one cool thing to keep in mind with my testimony specifically is that even before I hopped on social media, those are things that I dealt with. So I dealt with depression, I dealt with anxiety, I dealt with suicidal thoughts, I dealt with self-harm. I mean, you name it, I dealt with it. And the Lord did a good transformative work in my life. I got saved in 8th grade just before entering into high school, and it was in high school that I really started utilizing social media. So I think it was very primitive for me to have walked through those things, although, God doesn't desire suffering for us, necessarily, but he uses it for our good. He turns evil into our good. He was able to walk me through that and bring me through that. So now that I'm on this platform where, like you said, it is so evident, I'm able to be a light in that. And I think the struggle comes with those who don't know their identity in Jesus, because social media, you're making a profile, you're making a platform. In a way, you're creating a new identity that you want to exist, that you want to appear as. And that's just impression management theory at its finest, if you really think about it, if we want to bring in my communication theory major verbiage there. But no, it's a very real thing that people are trying to find their identity in this world, and social media is just such an easy way to get that affirmation, to be not only an individual, but to also fit in. And at the end of the day, it comes down to who are you getting your affirmation from? Where are you finding your joy? Where are you putting your identity in? And if it's in this world that is constantly changing and fleeting, then it's never going to sustain you. You're going to fall into depression. You're going to fall into anxiety. But it's vital, again, for me to be a light on social media in order to establish, no, at the end of the day, your identity is in Christ, because that's the profile, that's the person that people need to see, is that raw, real, vulnerable side.
And that's one of the neat things that we were talking about right before you came on. It's that idea that just the kind of the illustration that social media isn't necessarily inherently bad. What social media does is it just amplifies what's already there. And so if it's the microphone in front of the mouth, it is the magnifying glass in front of the specimen, right? Social media is just amplifying what's already been a part of it. And so I think one of the things that's so interesting about what you're doing is you're fully cognizant of the research, you're fully cognizant of the experience that many individuals are going on to social media, recognizing some of the problems that they have, because those problems are so human. Those problems of trying to find identity, those problems of trying to find purpose, those problems of just the comparison, all of these problems that are just a part of the human experience. But what you're doing is you're pointing to the solution that individuals don't even realize that they need when they get onto social media. And you're essentially redeeming it in such a way that might be beneficial not only for their soul, but also for the kingdom of God's extension, right?
Definitely.
So help us understand. So give us kind of some plugs right now. So tell us, if we go onto your YouTube channel right now, tell us what the YouTube channel is, and tell us some of the content that we're going to encounter on the YouTube channel, some of the recent stuff that you've done.
Awesome. So my YouTube channel, you can look it up. It's youtube.com/KirbyIsABoss. I know the name's funny, but I've had that social media for forever, that title, I guess you could say, that at. And it's my Instagram, my Twitter, all of that's KirbyIsABoss. But if you were to log on to my YouTube channel, as of recent, I actually just put up a digital devotional kind of thing. So it's a spoken word, basically talking about exactly what we're talking about. Look at God. That's so crazy. Just about my journey through social media, how it's a comparison game, and how we're trying to compete and keep up with one another rather than linking arms and building the kingdom, and just finding identity in Jesus rather than social media. So it's actually really cool that I hopped on this
I love it.
race stream and got to talk about that. But,
okay. Go ahead. So Kirby is a boss, ISA boss. And so we'll link to that not only on our show notes, but also on the social media page as well. And then one last thing. So we probably got a couple of parents. We'll just say a couple of parents that are listening right now that have got kids that are trying to navigate through social media right now. And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you seem like you've got a great head on your shoulders about how to navigate your way through social media. So what word would you give to parents right now as they're trying to think through, okay, I know that social media is just a part of the experience now. So what do they need to hear in order to help raise their kids in such a way that their kids can have a healthy head on their shoulders relative to the social media world?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think just an important thing to keep in mind is that, social media is one of those things that's kind of inevitable. It keeps us connected. There are good sides to social media. There's two sides to the same coin. But I think as you sit down with your child and talk to them about the importance of who they are aside from all those things, and you have open communication with them as to what they're observing, what they're looking at, and you guys are able to just have that transparency, I think it can redeem that situation because social media can be such a private thing. I think that with your child, you need to be able to have those conversations and make that public between you two that, hey, let's look at what you're looking at and find the truth in it and find the lies in it and sit down and just try and go at it with a biblical perspective and worldview, because there are all kinds of perspectives and worldviews being showcased on social media. But if you sit down and you point it out and you define the terms and the boundaries and the truth, then I think they will be able to better navigate it even behind closed doors.
What a great word. What a great word. Well, thank you so much, Kirby Minnick, for joining us. We are so grateful that you have decided to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are going to have to go to a break right now. But if you want to find out more information on Kirby, obviously you can go to our website. We'll be sure to put up some of her information, pointofview.net, or you can just go right to the source. And so look up on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. Kirby is a Boss, K-I, key point, not the Kirby Anderson that we know with an E, Kirby with an I, K-R-I-K-I-R, rather, B-Y is a Boss. And that'll be the handle that you can find her on. But then when we come back from the break, one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit more is College Gate 2019, what's happening with Felicity Huffman right now, the transition that's happening between helicopter parenting to now snowplow parenting. We'll be back right after this.
So you sit down and you do your budget and you look at all your monthly costs, your bills, your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would help? What would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. And that is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and it works. No wonder more than 400,000 people are doing this now. And look, whether you're single or married or you have kids, this can make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. Just think what you could do with $500 a month. That can cover a car payment or pay back loans or whatever. Join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Find out more. The MediShare people are so easy to talk to. They can answer any questions. They are super friendly. Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, or 800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I just first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, May 14th, 2019 day. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, here for the third hour. I repeat, the third hour, as we're making our way into the third hour. We've kind of honed in on a particular topic today, and we really haven't pivoted or deviated from it whatsoever. We've been celebrating Mark Zuckerberg, his 35th birthday, and have been talking about the influence of social media and the effects of social media. So during the first hour, we talked a little bit about some of the potential for the government to regulate social media, specifically delineating between whether Facebook and other social media entities are a publisher or if they are a platform. If they're a platform, they are simply just allowing other voices to be heard and to communicate their particular messages. And in turn, Facebook can't be sued because of what other people say if they're legally recognized as a platform. Whereas if they are a publisher, so say like Point of View, for example, if we say something defamatory, if we say something libel, slander, we open ourselves up to being sued. That Point of View is not a platform; it is a publisher. It is an entity that has legal responsibility to make sure what it says and what the mediums by which these things are communicated, whether that's the radio or whether that's this beautiful Outlook magazine that I have right here in my hand right now. We have to be legally responsible for making sure the stuff in this thing is true. And if you're watching online right now, you're looking at this, and I just need you to know that you can get your Outlook magazine. Oh, yes. And if you see this Outlook magazine, one of the beautiful things that you will see in here is you will see a great article by Kirby Anderson on the marketplace of ideas, another phenomenal article on big tech censorship, and then all of a sudden it just goes downhill so quickly. It's like this hill is like ice, and you are going to go downhill quick, and you see this article by Nick Pitts. But nevertheless, if you'd like a subscription to Outlook magazine, you can go online, you can call in, and we'll be sure to get you a subscription to that. We were talking specifically about First Amendment under attack. Does freedom of speech still exist? And so you can check out that Outlook magazine by giving us a call in, and we'll be sure to sign you up to make sure that you can get a subscription. 800-351-1212 for that, or call in on the office line, 800-227-1444. But nevertheless, we were talking about Facebook, social media, and then we pivoted a little bit more to talk about the effects that it's having on us. So specifically, we know that it's there's individuals there's more individuals that are giving all their money away to Facebook. I think 2 out of 3 millennials are being influenced by what they see online relative to some of their spending purchases. We also know it's taking away all that money, so they're not just being influenced by it, but they're spending because of it. And we were arguing whether that was a good thing, whether that was a bad thing. And then we just got through off the phone with Kirby Minnick. Kirby Minnick is a social media influencer, and you can be sure to follow her. She's utilizing her platform for the benefit and to promote human flourishing and the extension of the kingdom of God through funny and informative videos. And so you can go on to her platforms at her kind of handle is Kirby is a Boss. And so it's Kirby is a Boss. So unlike the man, the myth, the legend, Kirby Anderson, who is ERBY, Kirby Anderson, she is IRBY. But nevertheless, Now we're going to transition and talk a little bit about what many are talking about higher education, specifically what I refer to as CollegeGate 2019. Dun, dun, dun. So in CollegeGate 2019, we found everyone from Lori Loughlin of Full House, as well as Felicity Huffman, being charged in bribery in these scandals of trying to pay these higher education institutions in order to allow their children to come in. Well, yesterday, Felicity Huffman of Desperate Housewives fame pled guilty to charges, specifically a charge pointing to the fact that she paid $15,000 in order for someone to change the incorrect answers on her daughter's SAT test. And if I'm thinking about that, David, I'm thinking to myself, man, they got a deal if you had to take care of my SAT test. Man, there's a lot of incorrect answers on that bad boy. So
Right.
That's a heck of a deal if you're having a correct mind. But in all seriousness, though, like when you're thinking about this story, what are the aspects that point out to you? What does this indict? Just a cheating culture that we're in? When you think about, when you hear what happened with Felicity Huffman, what's happened with this CollegeGate 2019, what's coming out of it from you? What rubs you on?
Yeah, I'm really curious to what is going on in their minds. Like, what are they thinking that they need to just pay money out of pocket in order to change their scores, whether it's for scholarships, whether it's to be to enter into a prestigious university or whatever it is. But I wonder, you have to find the need to just pay someone for that. And so that just blows my mind, because in ACT, don't get me wrong, it's not like the easiest exam. Like, you need to sit in a room for a couple of hours and try to mark some answers and whatnot. But for me, I have trouble focusing for that long period of time. But all that being said, I'm just curious, just so many questions going on. Like, could that, the daughter, couldn't she just have studied, get a tutor, use that money to get a tutor, to just study, to actually work hard, put in the work to achieve that, to earn that in a way? But at the same time, the mother felt the need, or maybe it's the daughter pressuring the mother to feel the need to actually find someone to change the answers for them, And I'm just curious.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it rubs me the wrong way, because for me, I think you need to work hard and study and honestly put in the work in order to take that next step into going into college, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that here's a study that just blew my mind, and I think this study, again, I hope our listeners are paying attention right now. I read it in David Brooks's new book, The Second Mountain, and this is a study at a Harvard University. They asked 10,000 students. They asked 10,000 students of middle and high school whether their parents were more concerned with their achievements or their kindness. Okay, so 10,000 students, whether their parents were more concerned with their achievements, so grades, making sure they get into the right clubs, accolades, etc., or their kindness, whether they're being nice to other students, being respectful of their teachers. David, give me a guess right now. What do you think? How do you think this responded? Of the students, how many students do you think thought their parents cared more about achievement than kindness?
I'll tell you something. We live in a world of trophies, not participation trophies, but trophies.
What do you think? What's your number?
I would say the numbers, more than 2/3 are achievements.
Okay, so you think 2/3, 67% of parents are more concerned with achievements over kindness.
I would say yes, man. I feel like a lot of parents don't really care about kindness.
Here's what's going to happen. This is going to be the ultimate teaser, because we've got to go to a commercial break. So when we come back from commercial break, you're going to find out how many percentage of kids think their parents care more about achievement over kindness. We've got to go to a break, but when we come back, more from CollegeGate 2019.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke rolled out his version of the Green New Deal in a video from Yosemite Valley. He doesn't call for such draconian action as the legislation sponsored by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Her plan calls for net zero greenhouse gas emissions in 10 years. He has a target somewhere around the year 2050. Perhaps we should call it the light Green New Deal. In his video, Beto calls it the most ambitious climate plan in the history of the United States. You have to believe some environmentalists are rolling their eyes. His target is more than 20 years further down the road from the Green New Deal legislation in Congress. If climate change is such an existential threat, some candidates keep telling us, then why is his target around the year 2050? Most of this is wishful thinking and utopian planning. The editors at the Wall Street Journal lamented that environmentalist and Democrat candidates tell us that the apocalypse is coming, but refuse to offer a substantive proposal that is honest about what it would take to get to zero global emissions. This is a debate about how many solar-powered unicorns can dance on the top of a wind turbine. Beto would have the U.S. rejoin the Paris Agreement and stop all oil and gas leases on federal lands. His cabinet would then oversee the permitting decisions in the nation to make sure they account for climate cost and community impacts. Congress would have to enact emission standards and send a clear price signal to the market, which might be code for a carbon tax and other cap-and-trade schemes. Congress would also have to find the money for all of this. In the end, he has put forth a proposal that neither side of the political aisle would adopt. It is too timid for the environmentalist and too radical for most other Americans. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, joined by David Fraga here on the Millennial Roundtable. We have been talking about CollegeGate 2019 is what I am referring to it as, specifically in reference to the news that came out yesterday that Felicity Huffman of Desperate Housewives fame went ahead and confessed that she did indeed pay $15,000 to an individual to change her daughter's incorrect answers on the SAT, and we're kind of been talking about a general theme of what the Link's parents are willing to go in order to make sure their children succeed. I kind of illuminated the trend, I think, that we're starting to see this transition that's happening between helicopter parents to snowplow parents. And so helicopter parents being similar to helicopters that just hover above and wanting to pick up their child when they experience some difficulty or hurt or get knocked down, whereas snowplow parents playing upon the idea that children are snowflakes, they're weak and they're very fragile. Those snowplow parents are clearing the way so that children never fall down. So instead of preparing their child for the road, they're preparing the road for their child. And it's just I think we're starting to see this shift, and I think the research is indicating it. But one of the things that probably one of my favorite surveys right now is out of Harvard that I teased earlier right before we went to break. And so for those of you that weren't with us beforehand, so there was a survey that was put out. Harvard, 10,000 parents surveyed, middle and high school. They surveyed kids, rather, middle and high school students. And they asked these students whether their parents cared more about their achievements or about their kindness. And so, again, they surveyed students, middle and high school students, whether they thought their parents cared more about their achievements or their kindness. David here said a very, I would think a pretty ambitious number, 67%, 2/3. It's a pretty ambitious number. David, 80% of kids said their parents cared more about their achievements than their kindness. Is that not shocking to you?
Man, I didn't know it was that high, honestly. That's pretty high.
80% of kids thought their parents cared more about their achievements than their kindness. They cared more about their grades, their accomplishments, than their respect toward their teachers, their sharing, and their generosity towards and kindness towards their fellow students. And so that just it brings up a very illuminating point for us today. The reality that especially from the conservative standpoint, what you want is you believe that the family is like this bedrock institution of society that really is one of those permanent things that inculcates some of those rich and robust values. And you don't want that done, it's not that you don't want that done. You would prefer those values be instilled by the family in the children rather than by the state or the teachers to instill those parents. They can come along and edify and echo what the parents have already done. But if the parents are largely, 80% of kids said that their parents cared more about their achievements than their kindness. If the parents aren't getting the message, who's teaching the message to the kids? I think, which would be and again, and that ties back to social media too. No wonder that we're starting to see so many of these, just individuals that largely don't have an understanding and are suffering from these difficulties when it comes into social media. They're highlighting is because there's this understanding that they think their parents care more about what they do than who they are.
Right, and I could definitely. I see how this survey, they asked middle school and high school students, right? And that's the way they see things, because when they go home, you can honestly kind of start to assume that parents aren't so intentional. They say, hey, how was school? Hey, how did you do on this? Hey, how were your grades? How was your game today? And so it almost indirectly makes a young, kid feel like, okay, that's what they care about. That's what my parents care about. So therefore, I have to earn their love in a way. Maybe that's not exactly what the parents mean, but the intentionality there is like the parents maybe they don't mean to have the child feel insecure in that area. So, I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So one of the I'm captivated by this one. I think there's a lot of research around this that I'm just very discouraged by right now. There's another recent survey that put out that 67% of parents help their college student by reminding them of deadlines. Help their college student. Parents helping their college student, reminding them of deadlines. Like if my dad had to remind me of a deadline, he was going to do more than remind me of the deadline. If you catch my drift, there was going to be some discipline that was involved with reminding me of that deadline. There's a book out, Anti-Fragile by Talib. He argues that by overtly shielding their children, parents are inhibiting growth that happens within their children. Ben Sass makes this argument about the vanishing American adult. And, for our listeners that are aware, one of my soapboxes that I get on is this idea of these civic institutions and the need for us to not bowl alone, to be a part of the Boy Scouts, to be a part of Kiwanis, to be a part of a local church, to be a part of these civic institutions that really do inculcate, that really do bring about, shape us and form us and help us to become like we are people. That we have a responsibility, that as Jim Dennison says, self-sufficiency is spiritual suicide, that we're no man is an island, that we're a part of something greater than ourselves. And I'm afraid when we start to see ourselves myopically and really starting to be so selfish, that not only is it going to be detrimental to us and how we navigate through the world, but I just wonder about the type of world we're creating in that as well. I don't know what it was like for you growing up, David, but I remember, I remember like if I were to go out and I was riding down the street in Cookeville, Tennessee on my bicycle, if I was doing something dumb and I was outside the eyesight of my parents, I still had to watch out for Mr. Darby. Like I knew that Mr. Darby I had eyes out, and that he was going to be able to go back and he could tell my dad just as well as my dad could see, and he would trust him. And I just wonder, are we losing some of that communal social capital that I think is detrimental for us moving forward? And that's a part of I'm just some of my concerns that I have right now. Thoughts?
Yeah. So are you talking more like the community aspect?
I think it's all intricately interwoven, right?
Yeah.
Like I think about David Brooks has this project out of the Aspen Institute called Weavers, and it's building up, creating who are these individuals that recognizing that there are great tears that are happening in our social fabric right now because of one, either acting selfishly, two, just fear mongering, a number of things that they could be doing to create some of this divisiveness that just seems to be a part of it. Well, what Brooks has started to do is he's highlighting these individuals and these little entities, these little platoons, is what Edmund Burke is saying, that's trying to bring together some of these communities as well and bring together some of these things. And so I think about some of those individuals and how the selfish mindset and how operating and thinking that you're an island when in reality you're a part of something so much bigger. And especially for Christians, we also know that we're a part of the body of Christ, and like the hand needs the foot, and the foot needs the stomach, and the stomach needs the eye. Like we're all a part of this thing, and we're all doing this thing together. Hashtag High School Musical. We're all in this together. And so I just think that selfish mentality of doing something for my own student that we're seeing in this story. Well, you might be you go into great lengths for your child. That's a beautiful thing, but you don't realize that in that moment, that unethical thing that you're doing is robbing another child within the community,
right?
Of their rightful spot. And so I think there's an interconnectedness to it that I think we're missing out on too when we just look at the story for what it is.
Right. And like I'm very involved in men's ministry, and we always talk about what's that missing ingredient? What is missing here for community, for churches to grow, for all these things to actually take place, right? And so for me, I look at the statistics of that, and I see how it is a lot of men that are actually getting less and less and less involved in organizations and churches and groups, and actually stepping out because they rather be isolated and comfortable. They rather just have their own island, like you were saying. And it made me wonder, so then why is there no such thing as a healthy men's ministry per se? Right? And that's a question that we always try to attack.
And maybe the better question I would ask, and we'll have to go to a break before you answer this, is what does a healthy men's ministry look like?
Right.
Like what are the components, what are the data points that you're looking at that indicate that health is characteristic of that men's ministry? And in turn, out of the health of the men's ministry, what as a result is happening because of it? And so, but we got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we'll talk about that a little bit. What does a healthy men's ministry look like? But also what I'm really interested in is how can entities come together and help us to better understand that no man is an island? We'll be back though, right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined by David Fraga, the first, not the First Liberty Institute. David Fraga, talking to us a little bit about men's ministry. So one of the things that I'm keenly aware of, David, before we were going to the break, we asked the question of what are the healthy characteristics of a men's ministry. And one of the things that I am passionate about is these civic organizations, these nonprofit entities, these platoons that Edmund Burke talks about, that Tocqueville talked about, the art of associating that makes America so rich and so good. It's this idea of not necessarily what we do with the government, but what we do outside the government. What are those entities and those formations and those assemblies that we have that just identify problems within our local communities and then try to address those problems and not with governmental help, but outside of the government. And I think one of the ways, especially from a Christian perspective, is through these men's ministries of the church being the church and encouraging the people, and then two, identifying the gifts so that they might be able to utilize those gifts not only for the body, but also for the community as well, working for the welfare of your city. And so, David, you've been in men's ministry for a while now. And so help us to understand, because that goes back to the question, what are the characteristics, what are the data points that you can look for when trying to identify or trying to gauge whether the men's ministry you're a part of is healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've only been a part of men's ministry for a couple of months, so I'm going to do my best to articulate what I do know, and I'm still growing and learning. But all that being said, one thing that my mentors would always tell me is that young men between the ages of 8 to 14, if you want to be healthy, young boys, they have an indirect kind of a mindset, which means like to be brought up healthy, to go through competitions, sports teams, they understand how to lose, how to win, things like that. And then after that, they go into a mindset of being direct. Now, for women, it's complete opposite. They are direct. Growing up, they're already planning their weddings at the age of 6, 7, 8, all those ages, and then they become indirect, which is why you see groups of women go to the bathrooms and always be around community and things like that. So from some of the statistics that we started pulling as I worked with a little bit of a church at Gateway, Dallas, and also South Lake area, was that they did a survey for 6 months. They did something weekly where men would just gather, worship, and have like a speaker every single week. They would have a consistent about 250 guys that would show up. Now, that sounds like a good number, but the thing is, when you have only 250 guys at a church that has members of about 40,000 members, that is not very good on the numbers per se. So they started doing a survey, and they started seeing that over 2,000 men would show up for the first time and then never come back within 6 months. And so something had to change. Something had to change. And I saw that I didn't see this, but my mentors would see this, that this is a big issue. And how are we going to create a structure that will get men involved, harness the passion that men have and what they believe in? And when men believe and when they gather, cultures shift. Like if men gather in the name of Jesus in a place, like it just changes an atmosphere. Mountains move, things begin to break, things begin to change and move. And it just reminds me of just the biblical story of Gideon, 300 men.
Yeah.
So, but all that being said, what we usually do, what I've seen is that we do big events, because we essentially want to get them to small groups, to get to guys talking one-on-one to one another, right? Creating that community you were talking about, the neighbors, right? Inviting them into your home. And so the way we have to do it is to help the indirectness in order to go to that being direct. So we do big events. For example, we have Men's Summit this week, where we're going to have 3,000 to 4,000 men gather together in the name of Jesus, but we're going to have events like Ninja Warrior Facility. We're going to have archery, paintball, things that are amazing, that are entertaining, but then we're going to start breaking it down to medium events and then to small groups, because we're going to have community groups there. Okay. So that's kind of a structure that we've seen that actually works. That's mobilized men and equipped them as well. So that's usually what I think.
Okay, so boil it down for me. What are those characteristics, if you could give a sentence that you would say, what's a walkaway sentence of, and it has the list of characteristics that you would find in a healthy men's ministry?
Yeah. So to love God, love people was the biggest thing. But I would say even more detailed is to be known.
Okay. So a healthy men's ministry is a place where you're known.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am interested in that. I'm interested in that. I think that's a healthy thing. I do wonder, what do you think is the biggest detriment for men to have a healthy men's ministry?
Biggest detriment? How so?
What keeps men's ministries from being healthy then?
Men don't like talking about their feelings.
Okay.
So men don't like talking about their personal things. They just don't. That's the reality of it. But it's also creating that safe environment. Like I said, growing up, a lot of insecurities can develop that can manifest later on in life. And from what I've seen, I don't know all the answers, obviously, but from what I've seen, it is just it's certain strongholds. One of the biggest things, my friends and I were actually talking last night about this, is that in order for us to truly step into God's promises, we need to humble ourselves, right? And a lot of that has to do with not putting our own armor and putting the armor of God on. Putting our own armor could be pride, could be like, oh, we don't need prayer because we're good, right? Having that false sense of just like, we got everything on control. We don't need other people to know what's going on in our lives. So I would say that's the biggest thing that's holding men back from stepping into just being empowered and walking in that authority and leading like in a healthy aspect.
Wow. So maybe then I do wonder then, so I'm thinking about the pride, there's so many barriers. And so you're saying that fun activities would ease some of those barriers that they have?
Well, this is what we've seen. Okay. So we actually, a few years ago, I wasn't a part of this, but I was told this when they were going on a weekly meetings, like I was telling you about, with about 250 men showing up. They were like, okay, what can we change? So they decided to do an event. When they did this event, they called up Harley Davidson. They said, hey, all you need to do is bring some motorcycles and sell them there. You're going to have a few hundred people, which is more than what you'll get in your store in a day, if you just show up and just sell some motorcycles. So the church just started advertising this everywhere. Just like posting, hey, Harley Davidson showing up, come hang out, get some free food. Men love free food, right? Yeah. So free food, Harley Davidson motorcycles and everything, right? In North Richland Hills, that's where it was at. So what started happening, word got around. They did that. They were advertising for about a month or two, promoting it and everything. All of a sudden, about 2,000 men showed up. They didn't know there was going to be worship. They didn't know all those things. And it's not tricking them. They put that on the flyer and everything. But the big thing was the Harley Davidson. So that just comes to show men will gather for those things. Yeah. Right? Which is the indirect. But the direct is getting into the presence of the Lord, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would be interested to know what, because maybe I'm just not hanging out with dudes. Maybe that's it, right? Like I just don't know. I've got a friend that has a Harley, but I don't know if Harleys get him into a building,
right?
And so like if I'm thinking about like some of the biggest, I'm thinking through from a cultural perspective,
right?
Like what's keeping men from attending church right now? Like what are some of the biggest plagues on men? Because as you look through the culture, it just seems as though we're hearing mixed messages about even what it means to be a man right now. Exactly. And that goes back to our running debate that we've continued to have. Like, what's the definition of a man in this evolving, progressive world? Like, it just seems as though we're in a world in which up is down and down is up, left is right and right is left. And for men to take authority, then what one side will call it the patriarchy is establishing dominion. And then on the other side, if men just become weak and don't do anything, well, then you're seeing this it just is unhealthy results that are stemming from that. And so I'm perplexed as to what to call men to and how to call them to it, which is, I think, one of the ways in which the church has an opportunity. And I'm glad churches like Gateway are stepping into that space to try to figure out what does it mean to call men to be men, like Paul says in 1 Corinthians 16, to act like men, but what does it mean to act like a man in 2019?
Right.
Yeah.
So you're asking me what does it mean to act like a man in 2019? Well, man, I think that is a great question, and one of the biggest things that I myself do is a daily declaration. I think men need to really understand their identity. And when they understand whose they are, they can operate who they are. And so, just understanding that Jesus needs to be first in their life and they exist to serve and glorify God, that they also, if they're married, to love their wives, to lay down their lives, to sacrifice themselves for them, right? But also to disciple and to be discipled, in other words, to have Jesus be seen through them, right?
Yeah. We've got to go to a break. And so we're going to pivot from this conversation after the break. And for those of you that were with us last week, we introduced a new segment. And this segment was a raging success, this idea of news you can use. And so we're going to think through a survey that says America is in a very foul mood right now, right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jack Phillips's long ordeal appears to be over, but as Justice Kennedy wrote for the majority in Jack's case, the outcome of cases like this and other circumstances must await further elaboration in the courts. That includes First Liberty's clients, Aaron and Melissa Klein. The state of Oregon shut down Aaron and Melissa Klein's Sweet Cakes by Melissa, penalizing them $135,000 for the simple act of declining to create a custom wedding cake for a same-sex wedding ceremony. Oregon rests all of its actions on a law that theoretically applies generally to everyone and, on its face, treats religious exercise neutrally. That position is grounded in the 1990 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court called Employment Division v. Smith. The product of the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the majority opinion in Employment Division has been roundly criticized through the years. The danger of Employment Division is that it allows laws that do burden one of the key provisions of the First Amendment, namely the free exercise of religion, to escape meaningful judicial review. Aaron and Melissa's case provides the court an opportunity to correct that. Jack Phillips's case left American business owners wondering whether the government can prescribe what they believe and force them to confess accordingly. The Constitution prohibits government officials, high or petty, from compelling small business owners to create a message contrary to their religious beliefs. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, here for the last segment for the Millennial Roundtable, and we are having, yes, it is time for news you can lose.
Come on.
And so if only that we had some, maybe we should think through some intro music or maybe a sound effect for the news you can lose. So I think that would be something that we could do. And so started last week, we highlighted a social science survey about something about the human experience, and then we just kind of went around the round table and talked about it. Last week, we were talking about dogs specifically and how there's new studies that indicate all this germs that dogs are carrying around in their mouths, and then upwards of 50% of people said that they're willing to let their dogs lick their face. 2% were saying they're willing to let dogs lick their mouths. And so we just thought, okay, we're going to continue on with this theme. And so this week's News You Can Use, brought to you out of Fox News, that says Americans are among the most negative people on earth. Okay. So the new survey found that Americans are among the most negative people on the planet. That's right. Gallup's latest poll on the world's emotional state reported that 55% of Americans said they experienced a lot of stress in 2018, one of the highest rates out of the 143 countries polled, and well above the global average of 35%. So that's 20% points higher than the global average. The U.S. trailed only Greece, the Philippines, and Tanzania. Greece at 59%, Tanzania at 57%, and we're tied with the likes of Iran at 55%. The poll also reported that 45% of Americans said they felt they were worried a lot, and more than 1 in 5, 22%, said they felt angry all the time. And so the report also found that 64% of Americans aged between 15 and 29 said they were stressed a lot, and exactly 50% of Americans in that age group said they worried a lot as well. So, David, what are you thinking about this, man? We are an angry people. We are the most negative people on earth. Agree, disagree, thoughts?
I'm curious to see when this poll was taken. Was it during elections? Was it during
It just came out.
Just came out
this week.
So I wonder, but I don't know. I've never really seen as Americans as, cold people or people who are negative per se. Because I've always seen like so much social media videos and people just being encouraging. I mean, I honestly don't know what I think about that.
Okay,
that's just interesting.
Well, unlike Elsa, apparently we cannot let it go. And so as REM sings, it's the end of the world as we know it. And so one of the things that I was particularly captivated by with this, I started going on a tangent and started doing some other research on negativity. And so there was research that's shown that negativity rewires the brain, making it easier to see the bad in the world and harder to see the good. It affects your intelligence and ability to think, detrimentally harming the part of your brain responsible for reasoning and memory. Here's the thing, though. Even a small amount of negative brain activity can lead to a weakened immune system, okay? And the more time you spend around Debbie Downer, the more you become Debbie Downer. And so thinking about this from a Christian perspective, I can't help but ask, it seems as though from a Christian perspective, we're commanded to rejoice, is what Paul says in Philippians 4, right? And so as those that have been commanded to rejoice, David, help us understand that doesn't mean that we're simply to be Ned Flanders, right? Like the Simpsons character that just is do-diddly-do, always in a good mood, A.O. Like there has to be a way for us to, one, acknowledge the bad, but then two, believe in the one that is holding all things together and is working all things for his glory and our good, right?
Yeah, and building on top of this, I could see how maybe I do see a lot of people who struggle with embracing pressure or embracing things that may seem negative, right? But in reality, Scripture also talks about, in the book of James, where it says count up pure joy because it builds perseverance, right? But I think it's interesting how just it begins to build. The more people around you are negative that are negative, then the more you become that, it kind of comes out,
Debbie Downer
right? The Debbie Downer effect. So I'm curious to see how also the counter of that, how powerful words are when people are encouraging.
Yeah.
But I have also seen a lot of people be like, I'm just trying to be realistic.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's an illusion. Be like, hey, my perspective is that this is just what's happening. And if they disagree with me, then oh well.
Yeah, it's called the narrowing effect, right? So when somebody says, typically, and again, these aren't closely associated, but when somebody says, well, I'm just trying to be realistic.
Right.
Well, what they're doing is they're putting a false dichotomy. And so they're narrowing the multitude of options in that moment. And so when you suffer from the narrow effect, what you do is you go into a situation and you say, it could either be A or it can be B. Right. When in reality, it could also be C. It could also be D. And I could either go outside. Well, in reality, I'm just trying to be realistic. it's probably going to rain. Well, now you've said there's only two things that it can do, rain or not rain. When in reality, no, it could be overcast. It could rain for a time and not rain. It could be really sunny.
Texas weather.
Yeah. You never know here in Texas.
It could hail.
And so
it
it's
could
to
snow.
refrain from the narrowing effect.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would discount the person that just says, well, I'm just trying to be realistic. But
Right.
also the other point that I think is really interesting that we alluded to with the research, but then also you kind of highlighted again, is this reality that we are largely influenced by the people that are around us. Like if you are a Debbie Downer, if you have a Debbie Downer around you, your mood gets sully. Like let me just go ahead and name some names right now of people that just ruin my mood right now.
There's a
Steve,
list.
I'm looking at you right now. Just kidding. I'm just kidding with our
He's a
producer,
great
Steve. So we all know that there are certain people that when we get around, it just brings the mood down. And maybe that's the caution that Jesus, or rather the biblical narrative, heeds for us. I'm thinking about iron sharpening iron, so one man sharpens the other in Proverbs. I'm thinking about the reality of what it says and even in 1 Corinthians 15:33 of bad company will corrupt good morals. Like there's power in presence. There's a great power in the presence that you have with an individual. And that's just an extra word of caution to be aware of the people that you surround yourself with, right?
100%. And I think there's a few leaders that I listen to on podcasts, and they talk about the 5 people you tend to surround yourself with.
Yeah, the run rule.
Yeah. And it's really important. And I love how in the book of Hebrews it talks about running a race, run it with perseverance and things like that. But when you're running a race, you tend to do better when there are people around you that are running the same pace.
Smoke them. I don't want anybody around me. I want to smoke them. I want them to be behind me. I don't want them to be around me.
You're always trying to beat them, Nick. I get that, man.
Yeah.
But it's so true that just the people who are around you, your friends, they tend to they influence you, man. And I mean, that's just what it is.
Yep. And so that is your news you can lose. For news you can use, rather. We gotta work that out, because sometimes we've been going back and forth on that. News you can lose, news you can use, news that will snooze. But yeah, so that your news you can use this week is Americans are among the most negative people on the planet. We're right there with Iran right now, tied at number 4. And so maybe we can do a little bit of work so that we can, especially as Christians, understand, again, from the biblical perspective, we're not biblically commanded to be like Ned Flanders and to be just this good news, buoyant, just happy-go-lucky all the time. We read the biblical narrative, and it's very clear. You've got an individual in the book of Ruth that literally Naomi changes her name to Mara because she is so bitter about the circumstances that have been dealt that she finds herself amidst right now. She literally changes her name bitter. Paul was bit by a snake, but he was captivated by a vision of heaven. When we are individuals that are recognizing that it's not making us immune to always being happy, but we're always setting our eyes on the one who's making us holy. And in turn, we can recognize that he's holding all things together. He's before all things, is what it says in Colossians 1. And as he's before all things, he's holding all things together, and he's moving it towards a particular end. And that end is his kingdom come, his will be done, joy in our soul and goodness in our heart and good for the world as well. And we can take heart in that. And maybe that can lift your spirits up today, regardless of the situation that you find yourself in. And so without further ado, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back here next week.
So you sit down and you do your budget and you look at all your monthly costs, your bills, your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would help? What would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. And that is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and it works. No wonder more than 400,000 people are doing this now. And look, whether you're single or married or you have kids, this can make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. Just think what you could do with $500 a month. That can cover a car payment or pay back loans or whatever. Join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Find out more. The MediShare people are so easy to talk to. They can answer any questions. They are super Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team, pointofview.net/team, or 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.